Welcome to We Are Everyone, a video and podcast series powered by Pivotal Moments, and we focus on the intersection of mental wellness in the workforce. We bring together young professionals and mindful executive mentors to bridge the generational gap and bring to the surface conversations about the importance of mental wellness and how to overcome career tradition challenges. Mental wellness is paramount. Join us. Welcome to We Are Everyone. I am your host, Jen Sherman, and we have two very special guests on today, one of which is Emily Rasowsky. She's in marketing at Amazon and also an executive breathwork coach. What does that mean? Well, we'll find out today. We also have another great person, Steve Polo. He is the owner at OPX, and we're going to be talking today about the future of work, mental wellness, career transitions, and just really how to feel good every single day while showing up at the workplace. So hello, Emily and Steve. How are you today?
Hello, Jen.
Hey,
Loving
Jen.
life.
Loving life.
That's right. I'm going to say ditto.
Good.
Nice. So we always like to start off the interview with a statistic about mental wellness. So this one is 76% of people believe companies should be doing more to support the mental health of their workforce. And something we've been talking about at Pivotal Moments is mental fitness and being aware about the importance of mental strength. So what do you think of when you hear the term mental fitness? Emily, do you want to start?
I would love to. I think this is a really interesting term because when I think about mental health and well-being, I think about it more holistically than just our mind. And if we look at it in a silo as our mind is doing the stressing or the solving of the stress or the managing of the situation, I think it almost waters down what's actually happening on like a holistic, like your body, your mind, like your emotions, like everything integrating at once. So when I think about mental fitness, I think about how can we, train our bodies to actually hold things that trigger us in our minds or things that stress us out or get us running in a certain direction based off of something happening in our external environment. So it's resilience for sure, but I definitely think the word mental is a little misleading. Although I like it. I like it because it could potentially be like a little, it's very marketable, and I enjoy things like that. Like, oh, mental fitness, you could create a cute graphic about it. But I definitely think it helpful, but maybe is misrepresentative of what I think is going on.
Interesting.
Spoken like a true marketing expert, Emily. It's interesting because when you think of the word fitness, you think of physically fit, right? And so that's an interesting juxtaposition between those two terms, because if we're already thinking about fitness in our minds, now we've linked them to your point. It's the mind-body thing. And I don't know if it's the right term or not, but it's catchy for sure.
Yeah, I like to think of like flexing the mental fitness muscle, which we'll get to later in the interview of like how do you strengthen that. So, okay. Speaking of mental fitness, how do you practice mental fitness on a daily basis and also encourage your team and others around you to adapt a similar type of mindset?
Steve, you want to go for it? Yeah, I think I took this one. This one's on you to hit it off. Hit it out of the park. I just know it's happening.
Well, personally, and we'll get to this later too, the generational differences between the perceptions of what mental health is or the importance of wellness and health and wellness and that sort of stuff has changed over time. I think, for me, I connected a lot of my mental health with my physical health. So, and I think a lot of people do, I run just about every day, and that's the moment at which, the mind clears, that you're not kind of refocusing on all the problems that you've been experiencing over the day or the month or the year, whatever it is. And it's a little respite between, the hustle and bustle of every day and some kind of peace and quiet, sort of mentally peace and quiet. So, but, that's not a program that you can push out to folks that work in your company, or you can't do it easily. And I think one of the challenges we've had, and we'll get to this maybe later on too, is that I don't think companies know what to do. I mean, I think that's that's a big challenge. If you talk about for us, we don't have any particular programs focused on mental health. I think part of that challenge is the specter of HR, right? Which is sort of always in the background. Uh, the other is, you really have to build a safe place for that to happen. As a leader, you can't just say, can't just go up to somebody and say, so how's your mental health? Right. So I think we need more tools. I think we need more awareness, and I think we need people who know actually how to do it. So, I wish I had a clearer answer for that, but I think that's where we are at the moment.
I love that. I think one thing that I've recognized in myself as far as mental fitness goes is that it first of all, it changes day to day. I have general practices, not unlike Steve, where I, might link my mental health with my physical health, which I certainly like to move my body as a way to release any mental stress or tension. There's also more mindfulness practices that I integrate in my day, or the way that I eat, like all of these things, because I'm very much oriented to producing and achieving a lot throughout the day. I find that very exciting. It's inspiring to me to feel very productive, even though I know there's a lot of maybe negative culture around like the hustle culture, getting things done. That's not really what I'm talking about, but feeling really happy with the product that I've created for the day. So a lot of these tools that I do are to serve high completion or high achievement. I would assume is like the right term. Maybe that's not the exact right term, but something around like achieving what I want throughout the day. So I would say I have these routines. But to Steve's point, I definitely think that there's two elements that I see within a team, within a culture, that become incredibly interesting problems to solve, but incredibly challenging. So the first is, as Steve mentioned, your relationship with your direct leadership or your manager or your team. So if there's not already a sense of conversation around the table of like, how's everyone doing? I mean, I will not ever underestimate the importance of asking someone, hey, how are you? Like, even if it's on a Slack chat or, as you're stepping into a meeting, with everything going on in our world nowadays, I've been even noticing our team. And a lot of that has been led by our top down, like our leaders, even like at the very top, really asking, at least on the team I'm on, really asking and taking that time to, pause and reset. So we will ask, hey, how's everyone really doing? And what I've noticed, and I've been encouraged by this, is we're getting more honest answers as the weeks go on. And even just yesterday, we had a whole conversation about how, the next week is going to be really crazy. I'm based in DC, not the rest of my team is not, but there was an acknowledgement and a conversation. So there's a safe space. And then I think on the personal side, which is more of the what are we doing every day, there's the individual practice, which I think it is challenging, right? To sit in a moment that maybe you had a meeting that was stressful, or you just got a huge project thrown on your plate and you have 1,700 personal things you got to do. Like, how do you manage that situation? And I think for me, it's a mix of trying to weave in some of these more mindfulness practices in the moment, like taking a breath, or even this morning, I was feeling a little off with so much going on that I forced myself to go on a walk outside and listen to music. These things are so simple, but that step between I acknowledge I have a moment going on and actually taking the action, I think takes so much resilience and desire of your own mental health over the productivity that you want to achieve. So I think it's a moment to moment thing, as well as a safety thing with your management and with your team.
If I could, you said two really interesting things. One was, not just two, but two that resonate with me. One is that, two of the hardest things to do in your life is to stop doing something you do all the time and start doing the next thing. So stopping a habit and starting a habit are probably two of the hardest things anybody will ever do. So the ability to help people develop the habit around those things is really a key to that, because you can get off track pretty easily. And we all live relatively stressful lives. It's really it's hard to do. So the other piece, I think, was the check-in piece. And I think in the past, it maybe wasn't okay. We're in the midst of this really difficult time. And so if there was ever a time when you could sort of strip away the kind of organizational structure and start talking to each other as people. If you have a really strong culture in your company already, you got a really big head start. And one of the challenges, and I don't want to personalize this too much, but one of the challenges with somebody in leadership calling up somebody or emailing them and saying, "Hey, have you got a minute?" They're like, "Oh no, I don't have a minute. I don't want to talk to you," right? Because it's not going to be good. Mm-hmm. So what we did is I said to everyone, I'm going to send everyone an email, occasionally, and it's going to say checking in. And that means we're just going to talk about how we're doing. Not going to be work related. Going to say, how are you doing? And I think the challenge there is if you just take that as a technique and you're not sincere about it, don't do it, right? I mean, if you don't care, don't do it, right? But if you do care, I think that's important. It's a really interesting thing. I spend a lot of time in New Orleans. Well, not anymore, but I used to. And I follow a bunch of Instagram New Orleans things. And this one thing I follow at NOLA sends out this message, and it says, be sure to check in on your quiet friends, on your happy friends, on your strong friends, and each other. And it's a really powerful, it's citywide, right? It's a really powerful message. So let's hope we can build on that some, right? Okay,
I love that.
I love that. I actually am like, that actually makes my heart warm. Like basically everything Steve always says makes my heart warm, but that one in particular. I actually want to get to the discussion point of the 4 generations that are in the workforce. I mean, both of you, I do not like the term young professional, but it's just the fact of we are younger than the older generations in the workforce. That's what it is, right? So, Emily and I,
thank you, Jen, for saying that.
Yeah, we are younger, but that's only an age, that doesn't matter. But I just think in regards
not
of
mental toughness.
Yeah, exactly. But, I think that we're in a really interesting place, and but a part of the show and the season we're focusing on is bringing together professionals from different generations to have real conversations around mental wellness, particularly during these times in this, absurd workplace we live in. So we have 4 different generations in the workplace, and all of us have different outlooks on mental wellness, boundaries, what's kind of okay of, if we want to leave, or if it's like working from 9 to 5, or if it's like, what, actually, I like to work from 8 to 9 and then I'll see you later. So I just wanted to, get your take on, how should different generations communicate about the topic, learn to understand each other, learn to support each other. What are you seeing in the workplace in regards to that?
Go for it. No, you want to go? Well, I'm happy to. Yeah. I mean, I think it's an interesting question, because I would say in a lot of the teams that I've sought out, we have a culture that embraces more of a flexible mindset, which is inherently, I think, my perception, a little bit more of a younger generation, millennial generation. Hey, I can work whenever and work wherever. I think when it comes to performance and making sure that you're setting up expectations from a top down, I think that's really where you have an opportunity to have more of an open discussion. Again, if you feel like your team members, no matter what their generation are open to hearing what's going to actually make you thrive and grow. Like from my perspective, no change has ever occurred, whether it's in my schedule or whether it's in, the way that I'm working or how I'm working, without having like a real solid understanding of the other person's perspective and why they want me in the office from like 8 to 5 or whatever it is, like 8:30 to 5 on the nose. And then making sure that I am, even in that structure, creating space for myself to get the things done that need to get done in the way that I want to do them. But I think it has to come from mutual understanding. I worked in situations where that was the structure and there was no change, because that was just the way things were done and how things were handled. And it certainly did not allow me to stay there that long, because it's not very sustainable long term. So I think it's a really tricky question. And I personally don't think I have a good answer for it, because I've personally myself sought out more flexible environments, because I know that that's how I'm going to perform better. That's how I like to live my life. So yeah, I don't know. I'm sure Steve has more interesting things to say on this.
I'm sure I don't, but I have I have a generational perspective that often is an anchor rather than a sail. And I think when we think about it from the folks in my generation who are often in leadership positions, really need to recognize that the future of any of our organizations is totally dependent on younger people, period. It doesn't matter what you say. So if you can't figure out a way to have a dialogue about it, it's not going to happen. From a from a and it gets probably worse from a kind of mental fitness perspective. I say worse, but it's different. So I want to tie it back to that a little bit because when I still suffered from, if there's some trauma in your life, too bad. You just deal with it because that's what you're supposed to do. And of course, that's the worst thing to do in some circumstances. You probably know better than I, but if having experienced some significantly, I'm not going to make too personal, but some significant trauma, I said to myself, well, look, I'm a grown man. I can figure this out. Well, no, you can't. Sometimes there's no figuring to do, but there are techniques and there are people that can help you do that. And so I think from a generational perspective, there are two parts to that. One is how do we contribute to the growth of young folks, but how do we also, figure out how to incorporate the things that we just didn't learn how to do. I just want to pull that thread a little more because we don't have models for it, right? So same thing with this notion of servant leadership, which I think is a really valuable thing. It's not practiced a lot because nobody does it. They do the top down. I'm going to tell you what to do and you're going to do it, period. And so I think the generational challenges around finding ways to help each other and help our organizations be stronger mentally, the models are weak. And so I think maybe I just don't know about them. So I'm going to suggest that maybe they're not weak, but when you look around, you say, well, who's doing that? It's hard to find it, right? So folks like you, Emily, I think can make a big impact on companies, teaching us how to do that.
Well, one thing I want to kind of go a little bit more into, as Jen, we're going off script here. Sorry.
No, please do. Please do. This is what we're supposed to be doing.
One of the things that really there's been two things that have been weighing on me recently around this topic. One is what you just hit on, Steve, which is how are we to operate at the level we are asked to do when we are carrying a tremendous emotional, personal, interpersonal, cultural burden just happening across the board. And right. I think it creates a sense of friction. And also, I think, diminishes our mental fitness, to use that word, when we are expected to perform here. And I don't care how many statements you put out about what your value systems are or what you believe right. your company stands for. When there's a deadline that's related to something critical for the business, it's very, very rare that I have seen leaders in any business I've ever worked in put that aside for the personal, unless there's like a big personal emergency, like a death in the family. Like that's probably like the baseline. But when you're having a mental health crisis, if it doesn't show up as a mental health crisis, or you're not, whatever, or doesn't appear that way, I think there's a lack of disconnect because you're fine. Nothing happened. Like, it's okay. You can manage this in the hour, perhaps between the meeting we have and when you have dinner. You can manage it then. So I think there's a question that's been weighing on me of like, how do we do this better? And I think we've got some conflicting interests and leaders who really want to support their teams, but when it comes push to shove, there's a line that just doesn't get crossed on like how we manage that. And now more than ever, with everything going on in our world, I think it's become more intense. The second component is how do we manage on the day-to-day, like our personal stuff. So Steve, you mentioned that you've been through some things in your life that are really that can impact how you show up in your day-to-day. I won't put words in your mouth, but that's kind of the gist that I think I gathered. Yeah. Number one thing that I think is not talked about enough is how much that affects us like in our day-to-day lives. And that's part of the reason why I believe so much in these tools, whether it's breath work, which Jen mentioned that I do. It's a very somatic practice to help release trauma in your body through your breathing, because it's both unconscious and conscious. It will clear out a lot of the stress and tension, but you get it filled right back up if there aren't structures and systems and people and jobs and leaders who are supporting that. And so it becomes this filling up of the whale, and then with one little bucket you're like trying to pull it over, like pull the water back into the ocean. So I think in general there's a lot that we still have to crack through, and the question I keep asking myself is like, what leader is going to really take a bold stand, and who's really going to carve this out? Because I haven't really seen anyone in the workplace take that above all else, and maybe I just haven't looked hard enough, but it becomes a looming question, because I think that's where it changes on those like individuals who are willing to take that stand from the top down.
So I have a question. Do you think that it could be an evolutionary thing, that we slowly move into it and it becomes something that now everyone has a health and wellness director? I'm making that up. So I mean, will it be evolutionary, or will it always be, pushing a rock up a hill? What do you think?
You know what? I don't know the answer to this fully, but I have a perspective. And outside of the work that I do with Amazon, I run an organization that works on diversity and inclusion. I do a lot of things. And the core reason is I believe this is my attempt at trying to build more heart-focused leaders within the workplace. So we go in, we have hard conversations, people cry. It's a normal thing. So like I think it's so healthy. And
Right.
The number one thing that I have learned from 5 years of doing that is, just like the diversity, equity, inclusion officer, who I'm so happy is becoming more of a mainstay in companies,
Right.
is being recognized. They are always in conflict, not conflict, I don't think it's a really hard word, but they're always, there's friction points between their work and what they are here to do, and ultimately what the company has to deliver on from a like profits, KPIs perspective. And so I think there's always going to be that healthy tension, which is going to limit our ability to actually make wide change. So in a way, yes, I believe that we can be very incremental. And if we just included more, again, leadership voice that actually did things on a day-to-day basis to support employees, like from the top down, for sure, we could see change in the same way we're seeing some change as we've just been getting this huge new wave of DEI officers. But I think it'll be limited, and maybe that's pessimistic, but.
Well, you probably have a better perspective. I mean, I'm interested because because I think collectively there are so many things happening. The pandemic just put a super fine point on it. It was in the background, but now it's not in the background. Now it's in the foreground, and people are struggling, I think, not being connected to their colleagues. What we're doing now is a very poor substitute from sitting across from one another in person. It's better than nothing, but it's a really poor substitute. So I'm a little concerned that however long this goes, that there might be a little bit of a crisis of mental health that we now we'll have to work harder to overcome. I mean, I again, what do I know? I'm just seeing it in my conversations with people. So I think it's probably more important than ever, and I think we have to be careful not to let it be a buzzword. Oh, we're practicing health and wellness, right? Whatever that means. But you're not going to police it. People are going to have to be responsible for their own groups. I mean, that's all there is to it, right?
And you know what's also brilliant about that, Steve, is that when you look at some of the more like deadly things for us in general, the connection, loneliness is one of the highest, you probably know this, loneliness is one of the highest indicators of poor health or deteriorating health or bad health outcomes, disease outcomes over time, which when you think about that, what we're basically doing is putting ourselves in these silos that increase, like you just said, put a fine point on that loneliness. So I would even go so far to say we're almost, research would suggest that we are almost inevitably setting ourselves up for more challenges in the future if we don't have something to support. And I think the question then becomes, what is the responsibility of the business? What is the responsibility of the health system? What is the responsibility of the community? Those are like very interesting questions, but
Yeah.
I do think there's an opportunity, like you said, maybe it's a health and wellness person, maybe it's something else that could create that change to support folks as we go.
I'm just reminded, and this is again a little peripherally connected, Jen, so sorry, but we each say something and we think of 200 other things that might be.
That's why I matched the two of you. Why don't you think I'm just, this is my favorite. This is why I matched the two of you.
Yeah, I got it. And that's not lost on me. So this won't be our last conversation, Emily, I'm sure.
I'm sure of that.
Yeah. But I was talking to somebody, and I think I might have mentioned this previously, about the employee experience and how important it was. And this person said, well, it's not going to be that important because there are going to be a lot of people out of work and I said, well, I'm writing a blog post on that. I said, besides from being incredibly cynical, I think now it's more important than ever. Could it be that if we found a way to connect the mental fitness piece to the employee experience, that those companies would outperform the companies that didn't do that? And certainly, wouldn't they attract more people and certainly more young people who have this as an awareness? Wouldn't that be the case?
So Buffer I was reading up because honestly, one of the questions that I know Jen asked us was like, who's doing this well? And I'm like, I haven't seen anyone do it particularly outstanding or really make waves. And one of the things that was as I was doing my like, okay, let me just research this. See, those articles like top 25 companies who are leading in health and wellness, and you're like, not really.
Yeah.
Or maybe a little, like they have a gym, that's nice. But I was reading through one of these articles and something struck me. It's true. I mean, this is true.
Okay, fair enough.
This company Buffer, which is a social media tool, their CEO, I was so taken aback by this. Their CEO publicly tweets on a regular basis about mental health and wellness, and he created the unsick day, which is for his team. I don't know if it was a new concept, but I was very like, oh, this is interesting, where he allowed employees to take a day just because they weren't sick, just for preventative care. That's a bold statement. And they had linked it to an actual increase in performance. I think it was like X amount of revenue growth or whatever it was, like they outperformed some goals.
Right.
And I really liked that approach because to me, it showcases a top-down recognition of it. And then my assumption would be that because the CEO supports it and is active about it, it's part of his like brand, therefore part of the company's brand. Right. That the rest of the teams would be more apt to encourage that for their employees and actually get rewarded for encouraging their team to take care of their health, which I think is the key of making sure these things actually stick, is aligning your reward pathways with like mental health and wellness, or else like there's a misalignment.
Right. Interesting. Well, you just reminded me of something. When I was a kid, I was allowed a mental health day, like every 3 months. My parents said you don't have to be sick. You can just take a mental health day, which isn't that, I didn't even remember that.
That's innovative. Wow. Cool parents.
I didn't remember that until just now. I guess maybe because my mom probably figured she needed a mental health day. Who knows? But I think if it makes sense if we could tie those kinds of things to how companies perform. I mean, it's so logical though, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I think so. You can, the correlation, but I think you'd have to get really specific on what you're measuring, and how, you could look broad strokes, but I think it'd be hard for an executive to say, okay, well, what should I do of all these things? I think a lot of leaders in earnest, because they really are trying to not only help their teams perform well, because there's so much data and research around how that can help, but I think they're trying. I think from my perspective, and then it's just one person, it truly is top down. So if your top leaders or leader aligns to core goals or core values that like are truly throughout, then I think you can see the success a la Buffer. But if you're just saying, okay, we're going to have a mental health day, and then no one's really encouraged to take it, or everyone's working 16 hours and they would love to take it, but they don't feel they can because the world is falling every day. Like,
Right.
I think there's a difference between wanting it and then actually like embedding it into who you are and how you like assess people's performance and AKA give them raises, promotions, like all of that.
Right.
Praise.
Right. Well, it'll be tough to make it causal. It certainly could be contributory, though, among a bunch of other things. Sort of lumped under the whole notion of supporting employees in a different way, right? Or supporting them in a complete way rather than in a, sort of carrot stick way, which clearly doesn't work and won't work for the younger generations at all. They'll vote with their feet. I have no doubt, right?
And, 100%.
And they should, because, why would we deal with that if we didn't have to, right?
And just to chime in here, I think it's a really good point of, I've heard of now as someone who works for myself, but I really have a team of clients, partners where I'm accountable for a lot of things. So it's a little different type of a model. Having said that, as an individual, we are the masters of our own schedule. And I think it comes down to, like you said, Emily and Steve, of companies saying, hey, you have all these benefits. It looks so great on paper, right? But what's the actual culture of the company of can you take those benefits? I've heard of companies where they have all that. They have unlimited vacation. Okay, well, if you're pressured and you can't even take a vacation day, but you on paper have unlimited vacation and you're worried of losing your job, then you're not going to take a day off. So I think it really comes down to the culture. And, if you think about HR or a CEO, we don't know. I mean, I don't know anything about, I'm not a therapist. I don't know what's going on inside the brain. I think to, the point of, I watch the show Billions where there's that in-house therapist, right? And they can go to there. I mean, I think, we are looking at that chief wellness officer because that's not HR. HR people were not trained in that, right? Like they don't know. This is new to them too.
That's right.
So I think thinking about it's not slapping on benefits or slapping on corporate social responsibility or social impact because that's what you should do as a company. It's ingrained at the culture. So when you are coming in the mission and going back to cautious capitalism with our conversation with Jeff Cherry, it's ingrained in the company. So, thinking about that and thinking about that aspect of, we're living in a mental health crisis right now. But again, we're not even on the other side of this thing that we know what the effects are. We're just like talking about this so we can talk about it and be like, all right, I mean, what's happening tomorrow? I mean, we want to, half the conversations now when we get on is like, COVID or how are you doing? We're hunkered down. What's going on down the street in DC? I mean, we're all feeling that pressure. So I guess my question is, what do you, I mean, both of you have a outlook on it. I mean, work better day, Steve. I mean, you're the mission behind, your company is really working better, investing in people. So I would like to get your take on, and again, we can't predict the future, but what does the solution look like, right? Like, or, you don't need to be the expert, but what do you think? What would you want for your company?
You want to go, Emily? Do you want
me? You got it.
It's interesting you mentioned Work Better Day. The one that we were supposed to have this year, which was in September, got postponed for obvious reasons. And we were hoping to have it basically be on health and wellness. We didn't know anything about that either. So Emily, when we have that, we'll have you as one of the guest speakers, okay?
That'd be awesome.
Because we need direction. My first reaction to your question, Jen, is I have no idea. And the next question is, it'll only get done company by company. And individuals' commitments to what they believe in and to the people that work in their companies and what they hope to accomplish or the difference they hope to make, it's going to be up to us. There'll be no rule, there might be a best practice, but we know how best practices are. And so I think each one of us has to make a commitment because because we're committed to the people who are working with us and the world in general. Otherwise, not going to happen. So I don't mean to sound pessimistic, because I think there are a lot of people who are going to stand up and say, this is something really important to deal with, because the lifeblood of any company are the people that work there, and we need to make sure that they're mentally fit, right? I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about, to the extent we can, right?
I totally agree. I also, my mind went first to like, I'm not really sure, but at the same time, I kind of gut checked and I was like, I actually have some ideas. And one of the things that came to a head when I was at a previous company, we were really looking at investigating the culture and like, how could we actually improve this for just collaboration, empathy, like more holistic approach to how we work. So basically improving the workplace for like better resiliency of mental health and other things. And we looked at it in like 3 core strata. And so when I think about the solution to this, I think it has to hit on all 3. And that's the top. So that's like, what is your executive team saying? Like, what are your leaders backing? And maybe do they need a little bit of help or coaching or awareness onto like you said, Jen, like you don't know what's going on in someone's brain, but like, do you need someone to come in there and educate like your executive team so that they can make better decisions from the top down? Okay. So there's an executive component about how much do they believe in support and enforce and or like align to benefits, like, or align to reward systems, like that piece. The second piece is your middle tier. So your middle management, how are they basically reinforcing the values or not enforcing the values of health and wellness within your company and organization? So if there is a misalignment between what you want to happen and what your managers are doing in the interim, like you're going to have those ideas of like, hey, we have that unlimited vacation, but no one actually takes it because on like a day-to-day basis, you're not actually being able to give that reprieve or giving permission to have those conversations or have that reprieve. I think the bottom piece is really kind of what I was maybe knocking a little bit, but I still think is a core component of the solution. What is the access on the floor level? So what do you have like in easy access? Do you have like healthy snacks, or do you have like Cheetos, or are Cheetos something that actually reduce the stress of your employees? And like, that's okay. Like, how are you making these trade-offs to support the health and wellness of your org? And I think a lot of times the reason why a company might focus on one or the other is mostly because of how much alignment or input they have. And I'm really excited to see companies come up with comprehensive solutions that have like funding, backing, experimentation, testing, just like we would any sort of new product or innovation. Like we got to try this stuff out and see what works and what doesn't. Right now, I don't think anyone has it totally lock and step, but we can learn from what's working and try to see things on those 3 phases. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I suspected you had a better answer than I did. But it's interesting because I think while you were suggesting that the top-down aspirational or value structure, it needs to be in place, it is possible, however, that the bottom up ends up influencing those of us who don't really know what to do. And I was reminded we have, we have a bunch of folks in our office, a couple people floated the idea of a wellness week, and we have every day there's a different thing, how many glasses of water you drink and how many steps you took and what you did at the gym. And so it's sort of a friendly competition around wellness. So a couple of folks in our office came up with that idea and are running with it. Not now, but I think that's not something that the leadership thought of as important, but recognized was, once it got done. And so it's just a really small thing, but it's an example of, I think, how the bottom up, I hate that term, but the general group of folks come up with ideas and influence the leadership's feelings about it. I think that's a likely way as we move forward. I hope it is anyway.
I love that approach. I'm super optimistic of that too. And I guess I suggest that you can go in either direction. You could focus on the middle tier first. You could focus on, certainly the work that we do with the more DEI perspective, we target the middle tier because we see that as like a big linchpin of organizations and activating, So I think to your point, 100% agree that it can come from any direction. But I think my perspective is it probably has to align in all three in order to be successful. But we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately do, because it has to be a cultural attribute, not a box to check, right?
Yeah.
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 By the
To
way,
the original point.
I have to give a shout out to Bobby Krogan, who was the guy in our office who organized Wellness Week. So here's
That's awesome.
here's to Bobby.
Let's go, Bobby.
To Bobby. That's awesome. I love that.
Do we have wellness year? I mean, I don't know about you, but like I probably need wellness year at this point.
Probably going to need it, right?
Yeah, seriously. So I have a question, thinking about and these are all really good points. I want to be mindful of your time is, what does mental wellness mean to you?
I think it means being able to face the demands on my day, demands on my person, both in all strata of my life, not just work, but like work, friendships, like, physical fitness, like all these things. Like, I think it's, can I keep myself riding the waves of what comes up and not be totally shaken by all the things that might be changing constantly? Because I think that's constant, right? Change. Everything's always going to shift and evolve, and it's going to be hard to keep everything balanced. So like, can I stay resilient enough and have enough tools, resources, communities, whatever that is, to help me, ride the waves of being a human being? Because I think it's very hard to navigate this whole thing that we're doing. So yeah, I think it's keeping everything lockstep, and sometimes it doesn't work so well, and sometimes it does, but that's part of it.
Yeah, as kind of a lifelong athlete, I always thought of it like that. Like it was something. It was that you had to tough it out towards the end of the match or the game or whatever, right? And so, but that's probably not the way to look at it, because I think that's more that's a more socialized view of thinking you can solve all the problems yourself. And I think if we look at how other people do that, there are people who use faith-based approaches. There are people who have, community groups, there are book clubs. There's a whole bunch of things that allow us to, I think, manage our mental health. And I don't think there's one answer. After this conversation, I'm probably going to question more of the things I thought were what I ought to be doing than before we had it. So thank you both for that. But I think in the past, when we started this thing, I said, well, it's just like being an athlete. You just got to be tough and tough it out. But that's probably not right, So I'm going to use your thing, Emily. How about that?
I'll take it.
I think it's about leaning into those feelings and not suppressing them, because I think that's where a lot of the burnout might happen, or, passive aggressiveness, aggression, these things that like are the adverse feelings that come from being overwhelmed or anxious. So I think to your point, Emily and Steve, those are two great definitions. And then we always like to end the interview with what's that resource? And since we're focusing really on mental fitness this season, how do you practice preparing with, adversely mentally? And then how do you flex your mental fitness muscle? So that resource that kind of helps you do that.
I mean, I have two that I'll talk about. One is I do breath work every day, and I know I teach it, so that's like a thing, but I truly do it every day. It's the number one thing that keeps me, I think, as regulated as I can be, even when things hit. And the second thing that I've been doing that is so quick and easy that literally anyone can do this is pop on any sort of song, like kind of like lo-fi beats that have just like either nature sounds or like something that just reminds you that like there's more than just what's right in front of you. That has been, it's amazing the power of music to just transform your perspective. I am constantly just blown away by how simple it can be. So yeah, breathe and listen to music. That's it.
That's great. I run. It puts me in a different place. and it lasts even after the run's finished. And it does really clear, I can start a run like completely losing my mind, and at the end be, have some clarity around stuff. And it's really but, to your point, Emily, it's another way of breathing, right? And Jen, as you know, I paint, so that's another outlet for me that takes me to another place. You can get into the zone pretty easily and forget a lot of the challenges of the day. So those are my two things.
I love that. Well, this has been really great. I just want to thank both of you. And of course, I know we could probably go on for another hour. So we can always do that offline, but I do want to be mindful of your time. I just want to thank you both for joining us today on We Are Everyone. We have Emily Rasowsky. She does marketing at Amazon and also is an executive breathwork coach and just an amazing human being. We have Steve Polo, always loving life, also an amazing human being. He's the owner at OPX. And I just want to thank you both again. Stay safe, stay well, stay mentally fit, and happy 2021. Thank you for tuning into another episode of We Are Everyone. You can subscribe to We Are Everyone on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and also be sure to visit www.pivotalmoments.org to learn more about the organization. And we also want to hear what mental wellness means to you. So you can follow us on social media, submit your video, and we will catch you next time. Thank you so much.